What if the reason you've felt so disconnected lately, so out of place, so unlike your former self, isn't confusion or crisis, but confirmation? What if the unraveling of your old identity, the intense emotional waves, and the sudden loss of interest in things that once mattered to you, are all signs that you are standing at the edge of your final spiritual cycle? For most souls, spiritual evolution happens gradually over many lifetimes in cycles of learning, healing, and returning. But for a rare few, for God's chosen ones, there comes a sacred moment when the soul begins its last cycle on earth. And when it does, nothing remains the same. This moment isn't marked by celebration. It's marked by a deep inner knowing. You begin to feel the weight of time speeding up. The things you once tolerated become unbearable. Conversations feel hollow. Old roles feel like costumes. And relationships start falling away without your permission. Have you been waking up feeling like your life is no longer your own? Do you sense that your spirit is preparing for something immense, but invisible? That's because your soul remembers what your mind cannot. You are not going through just another phase. You are completing a divine assignment that has been lifetimes in the making. In today's message, we are going to uncover 9 powerful signs that you are in the final stage of your spiritual evolution. Signs that may have already been showing up in your life in ways you didn't recognize until now. Once you see them clearly, you'll begin to understand why everything had to happen the way it did, why the people around you started falling away, and why your heart has been longing for something eternal. These signs will give language to your longing and clarity to your confusion. If what you're hearing already feels like truth in your spirit, don't hesitate. Comment 777 below as your confirmation that this message has found you in divine timing. And to every soul who has supported us through Super Thanks, we thank you deeply. Your kindness and generosity help this message of truth and awakening reach those who are quietly crying out for answers, for connection, and for spiritual guidance. So now, the question becomes, what happens when your soul is done waiting? What happens when your final lessons begin to unfold loudly, painfully, beautifully, and you can no longer deny who you are becoming? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover may change how you see your entire life journey. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, if you are seeing these 9 signs, you are in your final spiritual cycle. In the earlier stages of your spiritual growth, every loss feels like the world collapsing beneath your feet. The breakup of a relationship, the closing of a door in your career, or the sudden crumbling of belief systems can make you feel as if everything familiar is being stripped away. The fear that rises, fear of the unknown, fear of making the wrong move, fear of being left with nothing, can be overwhelming. But as you step into your final spiritual cycle, something shifts inside you. You stop dreading loss and begin to see it as part of the divine design. Could it be that the very things you once begged God to preserve were only temporary assignments meant to prepare you for something greater? This deep transformation isn't the product of motivational thinking or surface-level optimism. It's a knowing that rises from your soul, a spiritual memory that whispers, "This is not the end, it's the preparation for something sacred." In this stage, your questions change. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" But instead, "What is God making room for through this?" You begin to see that loss is not subtraction, it's sacred space being created. The Bible echoes this truth over and over. Ecclesiastes 3:6 reminds us there is a time to keep and a time to throw away. And Isaiah 43:19 declares, "Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it?" These verses aren't just poetry. They are spiritual blueprints. What if your letting go is the divine trigger for your breakthrough? What if you're not being punished but positioned? The life of Job paints this vividly. He lost everything, his wealth, his family, even his health. And still, in the depth of that loss, he said, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. Do you have the same spiritual maturity now, chosen one, to bless the name of the Lord even when everything familiar falls away? Can you sense the difference in yourself? In your final spiritual cycle, the changes begin to accelerate. What once took years to shift now moves in weeks or days. Friendships dissolve without drama. Opportunities you once chased now fall away without regret. Even your sense of self, your titles, your labels, your past ambitions, starts to shed. Others may look at you and say, "You're falling apart." But inside, you know you're falling into alignment. Isn't it strange how peace can arrive in the middle of perceived chaos? Even in real life, those who achieve greatness often echo these truths. Maya Angelou once said, "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." The chosen ones walk that same path. You know, don't you? That beauty always costs something. So ask yourself now with honesty, what in your life is unraveling, not because it's wrong, but because you've outgrown it? What are you still clinging to that God has already declared finished? Could it be that this loss is not your destruction, but your deliverance? At this sacred stage in your journey, you begin to feel something extraordinary, a detachment from needing outcomes to define your worth. You're no longer driven by the need to prove yourself, to hold on, or to control how things turn out. It's as if your spirit has been rewired to stop chasing validation from people, positions, or achievements. Why? Because deep down, you've finally realized that the outcome doesn't define you. Your alignment with God does. Isn't it strange how peaceful you've become in places that once made you anxious? When something begins to leave your life, whether it's a person, a dream, or an opportunity, you don't resist the way you used to. You've seen the pattern enough times to know holding on only creates friction. Clinging doesn't preserve. It prevents the flow of divine timing. So instead of gripping with fear, you start opening your hands in trust. This is not about surrendering to chance. It's about cooperating with the divine intelligence that's been guiding you all along. Could it be that letting go is no longer a loss to you, but an act of sacred agreement? Jesus said in John 12:24, "Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. What appears to be an end is often the seed of something multiplied." Isn't this exactly what you're beginning to see in your own life? Each goodbye is now an opening. Each loss becomes a launching point. You don't grieve transitions the same way anymore. Instead, you thank them. You learn to say, "Thank you, God, for what this taught me. I bless it as it leaves." And this transformation isn't hypothetical, it's real. Consider Keanu Reeves, a widely respected actor, not just for his career, but for his quiet depth and resilience. He's experienced devastating personal losses, his partner, his child, and close family members. And yet, he's known for his calm presence, his detachment from fame, and his acts of silent generosity. In one interview, he quietly stated, "Grief changes shape, but it never ends." But you, as one of God's chosen ones, begin to sense something even deeper. Grief becomes growth when it's held in grace. Could it be that the pain you once feared has become the pathway to your transformation? You begin making decisions not based on what will keep you comfortable, but on what will keep you aligned. Even when there is no clear outcome, even when the road ahead is foggy, you walk forward in obedience. That is the difference now. You trust that peace is your compass and truth is your guide. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells you, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." That's exactly what you're doing now, isn't it? So you don't mourn the shifts anymore. You don't resist the changes that once terrified you. You stand before each closing door and whisper gratitude. You honor what was, bless what is, and embrace what will be. Because you now understand, truly understand, that every departure is a divine clearing. Every goodbye is an answered prayer in disguise. Let me ask you this. What are you still trying to control that God is gently asking you to release? And how much more peace could you carry if you chose alignment over attachment? Earlier in your spiritual walk, you were thrilled by the mystery of synchronicities. A stranger said exactly what you needed to hear. A random song played the very words your heart was silently screaming. The clock always seemed to read 11:11 or 3:33, and your soul would tingle in response. At that time, you viewed these moments as charming coincidences or divine hints that you were heading in the right direction. They felt like heaven's playful whispers, small nods that your prayers were being heard. And for where you were back then, that level of awareness was enough. But now that you're entering your final spiritual cycle, you begin to experience reality differently. Have you noticed how these synchronicities no longer startle you, but instruct you? It's not that they've stopped, it's that they've intensified, become more direct and less symbolic. Suddenly, repeated signs don't just comfort you, they direct your next move. A certain word, image, or name shows up again and again. And instead of wondering if it means something, you know it does. You've moved from questioning the signs to interpreting them fluently, as if you've learned the native language of your soul. Do you remember when you used to look for signs? Now it feels like the signs are looking for you. You begin to treat the world around you like a sacred conversation. Each moment is laced with meaning. Numbers, phrases, even delays. Nothing feels random anymore. This is the shift. You no longer chase affirmations. You read instructions. You no longer say, "What a coincidence." Instead, you ask, "What is God revealing to me here?" Could it be that you've outgrown spiritual breadcrumbs and now stand face to face with divine guidance? This is much like the way the prophet Elijah encountered God. In 1 Kings 19, Elijah is told to stand on the mountain before the Lord. A mighty wind comes, but God is not in the wind. An earthquake follows, but God is not in the earthquake either. Then fire, but still no God. Finally, Elijah hears a still, small voice. That voice was the real message. Have you learned to recognize that voice in your own synchronicities? Could it be that God no longer needs to shake your world to speak? Because now, He knows you'll listen even to the whisper. In the modern world, we see echoes of this awareness in those who've gone through deep personal transformations. Take Jim Carrey, the actor and comedian. After reaching the heights of fame and wealth, he began speaking about the illusion of material success. In an interview, he said, "The universe is not short on wake-up calls. We're just quick to hit the snooze button." For you, chosen one, that snooze button no longer exists. Every nudge, every repeat, every mirrored encounter feels urgent, because it is. You are now living in harmony with divine flow. In this final spiritual phase, your faith matures. You don't just believe in divine timing, you move with it. You don't just hope for confirmation, you receive instruction, and you don't delay obedience. You act, sometimes without knowing why, simply because your spirit discerns that it's time. Proverbs 16:9 tells us, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." That's what's happening to you now. Your course is no longer built on wishful thinking. It's being written in real time, step by step, through the synchronicities unfolding before your eyes. Are you still waiting for a bigger sign? Or have you realized that the signs are already surrounding you, speaking, leading, confirming? In this final cycle, you no longer walk by sight. You walk by deep, holy recognition. When symbols, numbers, or repeated phrases begin to show up in your life now, you no longer stop to simply marvel at them. Instead, something inside you stirs, an urgent knowing, a quiet command to act. You don't ask, "What does this mean?" as often as you used to. You ask, "What must I do?" This is one of the clearest signs that you've entered the final stage of your spiritual cycle. The signs are no longer there to just soothe you or remind you that you're not alone. They're pushing you, guiding you to shift quickly, decisively, and often uncomfortably into alignment with your divine timeline. Have you noticed how you can no longer ignore what you used to delay? The spiritual veil that once separated your human mind from your soul's wisdom has now thinned. You're no longer sleepwalking through life. You're aware, raw, and spiritually awake. As this veil dissolves, your inner world starts to reflect in your outer world with astonishing speed. What you feel becomes what you see. If you're anxious, chaos manifests. But when you're centered and aligned, the path seems to unfold effortlessly before you. Could it be that reality itself is now mirroring your faith in real time? The Bible speaks clearly to this kind of spiritual acceleration. Galatians 6:7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap." In earlier cycles, it may have taken months or years to see the fruit of your actions. But now, the sowing and the reaping often occur in the same season. That is why resistance feels heavier. Ignoring the nudges no longer results in stagnation, it brings disruption. But when you respond, even when it's difficult, divine momentum carries you forward. What is God asking you to act on right now that your mind is still trying to delay? Think of Moses standing before the burning bush in Exodus 3. He was surrounded by divine signs. A bush that burned without being consumed, a voice calling his name. But the moment wasn't just meant to impress him. It was a call to action. God didn't speak just to comfort Moses. He spoke to commission him. Likewise, your signs now are not ornamental. They are instructional. And the more quickly you respond, the more clearly you see the path. In the modern world, this kind of spiritual responsiveness is often seen in those who pivot suddenly toward a calling that defies logic. Consider Tyler Perry, the filmmaker and entrepreneur. Before success, he faced homelessness and repeated failure. But after he obeyed an inner prompting to write and perform his plays, despite no guarantee, they eventually reached the right audience. He once said, "When you haven't forgiven yourself, you block God's grace. You can't receive what God has for you." Could it be that your delay is not punishment, but a paused blessing waiting for your alignment? In this sacred cycle, you begin to see how resistance no longer stalls time. It accelerates tension. When you ignore the sign, the universe repeats it louder. But when you surrender to the direction, things unfold with ease. The right conversation appears. The unexpected opportunity opens. The person you were meant to meet walks straight into your life. How many of these divine setups have you already walked through without realizing? You are not just being shown signs to reassure you anymore. You are being handed spiritual instructions, divine blueprints, moment by moment. And are you acting on them? Or are you still waiting for clearer confirmation when the truth is already echoing all around you? You may have started to sense something extraordinary. Every thought, decision, and intention seems to receive a direct response from the world around you. It feels less like you're wandering through a maze and more like you're engaging in a sacred dialogue. Life stops feeling random and starts to feel relational. It's as though creation itself is conversing with you. responding not just to your words, but to your inner alignment. Have you ever paused to ask, am I witnessing coincidence, or am I finally hearing God's reply in real time? This is not about receiving validation anymore. You've matured far beyond needing the universe to prove anything to you. What's happening now is deeper. It's the result of spiritual evolution. You no longer require the slow, lesson-by-lesson unfolding of life because your soul has accelerated. You're no longer just walking through human experiences. You are co-creating them with higher intelligence. You're in communion not only with your own spirit, but with something greater, the divine blueprint that governs all. Could it be that you're now walking in agreement with the very design of heaven? In this phase, delays vanish. Opportunities begin arriving with surgical precision. You speak something in prayer, and within days, sometimes hours, it shows up. People who once drained your energy disappear. Not with drama, but with divine timing. What you used to fight to remove from your life now removes itself. This is because you're no longer just existing in reality. You're in direct energetic conversation with it. And when your frequency is this aligned with divine order, the world has no choice but to respond. We see this powerfully in Psalm 37:23. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Your steps are not random. They are arranged, guided, orchestrated. You begin to understand that your life is not something happening to you, but something happening through you, in collaboration with God's plan. And when you stop resisting and start responding, even time seems to bend in your favor. Look at someone like Serena Williams, known not only for her incredible athletic ability, but also her spiritual clarity and inner discipline. She often speaks about how her victories didn't just come from training, but from listening to her body, to her intuition, to something beyond logic. In one interview she said, "I've grown most not from victories, but from setbacks." Like you, she began to see her journey not as isolated events, but as part of a divine conversation. Isn't it time you started treating your life the same way? And here's the key revelation. Synchronicity is no longer just spiritual encouragement. It has become your divine strategy. You don't just notice signs anymore. You move with them. You don't question divine instruction. You obey it. Why? Because you've seen what happens when you don't. You've lived through the consequences of delay, but now you're in a new space. A space where your actions and heaven's timing are in perfect sync. So, chosen one, when life speaks, are you still hesitating, or have you learned to move without needing all the answers? What if the clarity you're seeking is already wrapped inside the signs you've been given? One of the most emotionally intricate and spiritually challenging transitions you experience in the final stage of your awakening is the profound transformation in how you relate to the pain of others. In earlier phases of your journey, your sensitivity was a beacon. As your spiritual awareness expanded, you began to feel things others couldn't articulate. Their wounds became visible to you. Their suffering echoed inside you. You felt responsible to fix it, to heal it, to hold it. Have you ever asked yourself why the pain of others once felt so much like your own? For years, perhaps even decades, you poured yourself out trying to soothe the people around you. You offered advice when they didn't ask. You stayed up late listening to problems that never changed. You stretched yourself thin in relationships where your presence became more of a crutch than a catalyst. This came from a place of love, but also from a hidden belief that it was your job to carry their burdens. And in doing so, you often neglected your own. Could it be that your compassion, though genuine, became entangled with a need to be needed? Even Jesus, who had the power to heal all, did not chase people down to fix them. He waited for faith. In Matthew 9:22, when the woman with the issue of blood touched his garment, he didn't say, "I healed you because I sensed your pain." He said, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has healed you." Healing was a mutual exchange. It required desire, effort, and readiness from the other person. Are you still offering your energy where there is no faith, no desire, no readiness? This is where your journey now changes. In the final spiritual cycle, your soul begins to understand that you are not here to carry everyone. You are here to honor their journey while stewarding your own. You stop rushing in to rescue people from the very lessons God is using to awaken them. And that is no small shift. It's heartbreaking at first. It feels like abandonment, but it's actually alignment. You begin to see that stepping back is sometimes the most sacred act of love. This shift is echoed in the wisdom of boundaries. Proverbs 4:23 teaches, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Guarding your heart doesn't mean closing it. It means discerning where to invest your emotional and spiritual resources. You begin to choose peace over approval. You choose inner alignment over outward applause. And this doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. One powerful real-life example is Brené Brown, a research professor known for her work on vulnerability and boundaries. She once said, "Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it." For you, chosen one, this means recognizing that your time, your energy, your presence, they are sacred. And not everyone has the right to receive them, especially if they refuse to grow. You no longer rush into every storm with an umbrella. You stand still and ask, is this storm mine to calm, or is this person's awakening being delivered through the rain? You now understand that there's a difference between helping and enabling, between holding space and holding responsibility. And this is where your spiritual maturity shines most. You finally realize that some people are not waiting for healing. They're addicted to their chaos. And the longer you try to save them, the longer they stay stuck. So now, instead of carrying others' burdens uninvited, you bring them to God. You intercede without interfering. You hold compassion without losing clarity. You walk in love, but you no longer walk into fires that God never asked you to enter. Chosen one, how much of your exhaustion has come from helping where God never called you? And what would shift in your life if you trusted others enough to face their own sacred lessons? But as you step into your final spiritual cycle, something profound begins to shift within you. The compassion you've always carried, deep, sincere, unwavering, does not disappear. It becomes more refined. The heavy impulse to rush in and save others begins to dissolve. Not because you love less, but because you understand more. You begin to see that healing is not something you can force on someone who isn't ready to receive it. You realize that the hunger for truth must come from within. Haven't you noticed that even those who say they want clarity often resist it when it finally comes? There's a sacred revelation in this cycle. You're no longer trying to outrun people's pain with solutions. You've come to understand a hard, holy truth. Not everyone wants to be healed. Not everyone is willing to confront the shadows that have kept them bound. And if you intervene too soon, you might be robbing them of the very experience God is using to shape them. Could it be that your silence, your stillness, your non-intervention is actually part of their divine process? This is the wisdom that begins to govern your choices. The urgency that once made you act has been replaced by discernment. You now offer love without attachment, guidance without expectation. You hold space without absorbing pain that was never yours to carry. You observe others' journeys with open hands rather than grasping ones. And at first, this kind of spiritual detachment can feel uncomfortable. You may ask yourself in quiet moments, am I becoming cold? Have I stopped caring? Am I giving up on people I used to fight for? But no, this is not numbness. This is maturity. This is evolution. Jesus modeled this perfectly. In Mark 6:5-6, we're told that in his own hometown, Jesus could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Even Christ himself did not override free will. He didn't force healing where there was no belief. Doesn't that tell you something? You too must learn to honor the timing of others without sacrificing your own peace. This kind of maturity is echoed in the life of the late Maya Angelou, a poet, author, and speaker whose wisdom inspired generations. She once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." You no longer argue with who people are. You don't try to reshape their journey to make it more bearable for them or for yourself. You accept, release, and move forward. In this sacred detachment, your presence becomes purer. You're no longer offering help to be helpful. You're offering truth because you're aligned with it. And when someone is ready, you're there. But when they're not, you step aside without guilt. You stop interrupting God's process in their lives because you've finally realized He never asked you to take His place. Isn't that the freedom you've been longing for? So, chosen one, ask yourself honestly, are you holding on to someone else's breakthrough out of love or out of fear that you'll lose your role in their story? And if you truly trusted God's timing in their life, would you still feel responsible to rescue them? You have now entered a sacred phase of discernment. You are no longer trying to bend others toward awakening. You are honoring their free will, their journey, their divine timing, and the silent soul contracts they must fulfill. And in doing so, you step into a new level of spiritual integrity. Something powerful begins to unfold. Your energy is no longer scattered. You stop leaking power into places that can't receive it. You stop overwatering dry soil that was never meant to nourish your roots. Instead, you begin investing your light where it can truly ignite growth. Have you noticed how your peace multiplies when you stop chasing broken vessels? This transition doesn't come from pride or disinterest. It comes from clarity. You start recognizing that love does not always mean involvement. Some lessons are meant to be walked alone. By stepping back, you make room for God to step in. By saying, "This is not mine to carry," you're not abandoning anyone. You're acknowledging that their transformation must be led by their own willingness, not your intervention. Isn't it a relief to know that your only job is to shine, not to drag others into the light? In Matthew 10:14, Jesus instructed his disciples, "If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet." That wasn't a command to be unkind. It was divine wisdom. It meant, don't waste your oil. Don't exhaust your spirit where the soil is not fertile. You're not here to force change. You're here to be faithful. And once you accept this, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start attracting people who are ready. Souls who are not just seeking temporary comfort, but long-term transformation. Clients, friends, or communities begin to show up in your life who don't want you to save them, but to challenge them, stretch them, grow them. People whose spirit responds to your presence, not with resistance, but with hunger. Can you feel the difference? This is your turning point. You move from being an emotional rescuer, always reacting to distress, to becoming an energetic guide who radiates calm, clarity, and truth. You are no longer a life raft, constantly pulled into other people's storms. You are a lighthouse, firmly planted, sending light to those willing to navigate by it. And not everyone will, but the ones who do, they will be forever changed by your presence. One example of this shift is Eckhart Tolle, author of The Power of Now. Once deeply depressed and consumed by inner turmoil, he experienced a profound awakening. Afterward, he stopped trying to argue people into enlightenment. Instead, he became still, present, and deeply rooted. And from that grounded space, millions found light through his words. He once said, "You don't become good by trying to be good, but by finding the goodness that's already within you." Isn't that what you're now helping others do, without pushing, without fixing? Where have you been trying to be a lifeline to someone who isn't reaching back? And how would your life shift if you stopped paddling toward their chaos and simply stood as light, unshaken, unwavering, and free? In the earlier stages of your spiritual growth, you did what many chosen ones are divinely led to do. You found ways to survive, to navigate emotional chaos, spiritual exhaustion, and the quiet pain of feeling different. You leaned into tools that made sense at the time. Maybe you wrote down your thoughts just to release the weight on your chest. Perhaps you prayed or meditated, hoping for a glimpse of peace in the midst of confusion. Some of these tools came from God's wisdom, but others were illusions dressed as comfort, overcommitting yourself, losing hours online, striving to be accepted by people who couldn't see your divine calling. Why did these behaviors feel so necessary back then? Could it be that God allowed them for a season, not to define you, but to protect you until you were ready? These habits created a sense of stability. They weren't evil. They were part of the scaffolding that supported your becoming. But scaffolding is temporary, and now, without warning, the structure begins to fall away. The things that once soothed you suddenly feel suffocating. What used to work now drains you. Have you noticed that no matter how hard you try to escape into distractions, your soul refuses to go numb? This is the mark of your final spiritual cycle, the moment when surface-level comforts no longer satisfy the deep hunger for truth inside you. Even your spiritual routines may begin to feel stale, repeating the same words in prayer, attending gatherings that no longer stir your spirit, or pretending to be fine when you're being unraveled from the inside out. These things no longer bring peace. Why is this happening? Because God is calling you into deeper waters. You are being invited to experience the kind of faith that doesn't rely on routine, but on revelation. In Isaiah 43:19, God declares, "Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" Could it be that the discomfort you're feeling is God's hand gently tearing away everything that's outdated, so you can step into what is eternal? Think about the prophet Elijah. After his bold stand against the prophets of Baal, he fled into the wilderness and cried out for death, exhausted and alone. But instead of judging him, God sent an angel with food, water, and rest. Why? Because even God's strongest warriors need renewal. Could the emptiness you're experiencing now be a divine pause, a moment where God is not abandoning you, but strengthening you quietly for the battle ahead? Real-life stories often mirror this divine truth. Actor Jim Caviezel, known for playing Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, spoke about how he suffered immense physical pain during filming, from lightning strikes to shoulder dislocations. But, he said, "It wasn't about me playing Jesus, it was about letting Christ play through me." Are you like him, being refined through discomfort so the world no longer sees just you, but Christ living through you? When distractions fail, when escapism crumbles, and when spiritual routines lose their spark, it doesn't mean you're losing your faith. It means you're being invited to go higher. The question is, will you accept the invitation even when it costs your comfort? Will you stay in the fire long enough to be transformed rather than simply relieved? Paul reminds us in Romans 12:2, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Right now, your mind is being renewed, your soul is shedding its old skin, and your spirit is being recalibrated to a new frequency, one that only the truly chosen can perceive. This new phase can feel unsettling, even confusing. At first, you may question yourself, why do I feel so off track? Why do my usual routines feel so lifeless? You might assume you're losing your discipline, your drive, or even your faith. But that's not the case. You're not falling apart, you're falling into alignment. What's actually happening is that your soul is no longer satisfied with surface-level movement. It's demanding depth, truth, and presence. You've outgrown the version of yourself that survived by managing emotions or avoiding discomfort. Now, you're being called to live your spiritual truth, not just think about it. Can you feel that holy pressure building, not from outside expectations, but from within your own spirit? This is the invitation of the final spiritual cycle. It doesn't come with comfort, it comes with clarity. Your soul is done negotiating with procrastination, avoidance, or half-hearted living. If an emotion rises up, you are no longer allowed to ignore it or push it down. You are being asked to feel it fully, name it truthfully, and release it completely. If an old behavioral pattern shows up, people-pleasing, fear of rejection, self-doubt, you're not meant to observe it passively. You're meant to confront it, and with God's help, break it once and for all. If an opportunity knocks, this is no longer a time to wait, overthink, or seek permission. You are meant to respond, not from fear, but from the boldness of your calling. Remember when Esther was faced with a defining moment? She could have remained silent to preserve her comfort and safety. But Mordecai's words echo to every chosen soul. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther 4:14. That same question whispers to you now. Could it be that your discomfort is actually divine preparation for a mission only you can fulfill? This shift in your spiritual life is not a punishment. God isn't stripping you of your comfort to harm you. He's refining you to trust your core, not your crutches. Like David, who could no longer wear Saul's armor because it didn't fit him. You are being asked to shed all that is not authentically yours. Why keep using borrowed tools when God has already equipped your soul with exactly what you need? You are being invited to step into your spiritual sovereignty, not with arrogance, but with deep, reverent authority. And in time, as you walk further into this final cycle, you'll begin to see clearly what you thought was loss was actually liberation. What seemed like chaos was actually reordering. You aren't losing anything vital. You're gaining what was always yours. Divine power that no longer depends on external affirmation, ritualistic routine, or emotional avoidance. You are becoming whole. Steve Harvey, a man known today for his faith and resilience, once shared how he hit rock bottom, living out of his car for years. But in his darkest season, he said, "I couldn't figure out what God was doing, but he was building something in me I couldn't yet see." Could the same be true for you? Could what feels like emotional nakedness actually be spiritual armor being forged? As Romans 8:37 boldly declares, "In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." The power you're now receiving is not the kind that shields you from pain. It is the kind that transforms you through it. This is what it means to stand fully in alignment with your calling, not rehearsing, not delaying, but responding with presence, purity, and purpose. In the earlier stages of your spiritual awakening, you may have clung to relationships that no longer aligned with who you were becoming, and that's okay. Growth can be messy. When your spirit first began to stir, you likely tried to take others with you. You softened your truth to make it easier for them to digest. You over-explained your shifts, hoping they would understand or even grow with you. You compromised your peace to maintain the peace. Have you ever stayed silent just to avoid conflict, even when your soul was screaming for honesty? You tolerated the misalignment, not because you lacked awareness, but because you valued loyalty, family, shared history. And maybe, deep down, you feared being truly alone. This is human, and God sees that. Ending relationships is never easy, especially when the memories are sweet and the attachments run deep. You wanted to believe that with enough patience, love, or sacrifice, others would catch up to your transformation. But spiritual evolution doesn't wait for everyone to be ready. As you step into your final spiritual cycle, the gap between your frequency and theirs becomes too wide to bridge through effort alone. Suddenly, the things you once ignored feel intolerable, not because you are judging them, but because your soul no longer permits dishonesty, whether it's coming from others or from within you. This inner shift is sacred. You are not becoming colder, you're becoming clearer. You are not hardening your heart, you're protecting your peace. Think of Abraham in Genesis 12. When God called him into his divine destiny, Abraham had to leave behind his country, his father's house, and the familiar comfort of the past. What might have happened if he had refused to separate from what no longer aligned with God's purpose for him? Is there a connection in your own life that God is now gently asking you to release? And as you begin releasing misaligned connections, you may feel grief, even guilt. You might wonder, am I abandoning them? Am I being selfish? But you're not walking away to hurt anyone. You're walking toward truth. You're honoring the divine assignment over your life. In 2 Corinthians 6:14, Paul asks, "What fellowship can light have with darkness?" It's not about seeing others as unworthy. It's about recognizing when the energy of a relationship is dimming your light instead of fueling your fire. You may begin to notice this shift without effort. Conversations that once flowed now feel forced. Your body tightens around certain people. Interactions leave you feeling drained instead of uplifted. And yet, as some doors gently close, others swing open. New people with aligned values, deep spiritual resonance, and genuine respect begin to appear, not as replacements, but as reflections of the person you're becoming. Could this be God's way of showing you that what you release in obedience, He restores in abundance? A powerful example of this can be seen in the life of Nelson Mandela. While in prison, he had to let go of certain relationships, allegiances, and attachments that no longer aligned with his higher vision of peace and reconciliation. He once said, "There is nothing like returning to a place that remains unchanged to find the ways in which you yourself have altered." Are you starting to feel that now, when you revisit old places or people and realize your spirit simply no longer fits there? This isn't rejection, it's redirection. You are no longer able to shrink to stay connected. The vibration of your soul has changed, and what no longer resonates must fall away. Trust that this is not isolation, it is consecration. You are being set apart not to be alone, but to be aligned. And with every step of obedience, your path becomes clearer, your peace becomes deeper, and your destiny becomes unstoppable. What once felt tolerable now weighs heavily on your spirit. Conversations that used to flow now feel hollow. You listen, but your soul no longer engages. You speak, but your words land in empty space. Even small talk, once harmless, now feels like a distraction from your deeper truth. Can you feel it? That quiet ache when your heart no longer finds meaning in the places it once called home. Your spirit no longer pretends. Without dramatic goodbyes or loud confrontations, things begin to shift. You stop texting first. You stop explaining yourself. You feel the energy begin to fade. Friendships slowly slip away. Family ties that once held weight begin to loosen. And romantic connections that aren't rooted in shared growth or spiritual alignment seem to dissolve. Not over years, but sometimes overnight. It can feel sudden, jarring, as if the ground beneath your feet is changing faster than you can adjust. At first, this change may look like loss, and the human part of you might grieve. You might wonder, am I pushing people away? Am I doing something wrong? But the deeper truth is this: you're not collapsing, you're being cleansed. As you enter your final spiritual cycle, the universe, guided by God's hand, no longer permits stagnant energy to cling to you. What was once good enough is no longer enough for the version of you that is being born. God is elevating your path. and that elevation demands release. Jesus himself experienced this shift. In Luke 8:51, when he was about to raise Jairus' daughter from the dead, he allowed only Peter, James, and John into the room with him. Why? Because the room of miracles must be cleared of doubt, mockery, and misalignment. Not everyone is meant to witness your resurrection. Could it be that God is protecting your rebirth by filtering out those who can't handle the power of where you're going? And the more you try to resist these changes by forcing old conversations, clinging to outdated roles, or chasing familiar energy, the more painful the process becomes. That's why, eventually, you let go, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, not from coldness, but from sacred surrender. And as you release, you begin to witness something extraordinary. For every soul that quietly exits, another arrives, one that truly sees you, honors your growth, and walks beside you without draining your light. These new connections feel different. They don't require performance. You don't have to shrink, filter, or translate your truth. Conversations are alive. They are mutual, rich, and expansive. They make your spirit breathe deeper. These people are not distractions. They are divine alignments. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." You're finally surrounded by those who sharpen you, not those who dull your shine. This new season of your life is not about keeping relationships for the sake of comfort or history. It's about building something higher, something sacred. You are no longer trying to maintain connections that reflect who you used to be. You're now forming bonds that resonate with who you are becoming. Take a lesson from Michelle Obama, who once shared in her memoir, Becoming, "Your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own." As you walk in your truth, are you surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your story, or only those who were comfortable with your previous chapter? This is the energetic clarity of the final cycle. It's not loneliness, it's refinement. It's not rejection, it's redirection. God is not isolating you. He is elevating your environment to match the level of your anointing. And will you trust the divine rearrangement? Will you let go so you can rise? In the earlier stages of your spiritual journey, complexity often felt like the path to truth. You were hungry for answers, desperate to understand the unseen forces shaping your inner world. So you read every book you could find on consciousness, healing, energy, the divine. You attended workshops, enrolled in courses, listened to spiritual teachers, studied astrology, numerology, theology, psychology, anything that promised to bring you closer to the truth of who you are. You experimented with rituals, chants, vision boards, shadow work, fasting, mantras, and meditations. And every new practice, every new layer of understanding made you feel like you were progressing. In many ways, you were. That season of exploration was divinely orchestrated. It helped you break free from the limiting frameworks that once kept your soul boxed in. But as you now begin to walk through your final spiritual cycle, something unexpected happens. The hunger for spiritual complexity begins to quiet. You no longer feel drawn to endless information. You no longer chase certifications or collect tools like badges of honor, not because you've stopped growing, but because you've grown enough to see what really matters. You start to realize that beneath all the layers of knowledge, true wisdom is breathtakingly simple. Could it be that what your soul truly craves is not more, but deeper? This sacred shift is not a regression, it's a refinement. You begin to let go of the need to analyze everything. You stop obsessing over signs, synchronicities, and spiritual to-do lists. You no longer seek truth in external voices, but start recognizing the still, small voice of God within you. As it says in Ecclesiastes 1:18, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow." Not all knowledge is meant to be held forever. Some of it is simply meant to lead you back to the simplicity of divine trust. Think about Jesus himself. The Son of God didn't speak in long, complicated discourses filled with esoteric language. He taught in parables. He spoke to fishermen, widows, farmers, and children with clarity and power. Why? Because real truth touches the heart, not just the intellect. In Matthew 11:25, Jesus praised the Father, saying, "You have hidden these things from the wise and learned, and revealed them to little children." Is it possible that the final stage of your journey is not about collecting more understanding, but becoming more like a child, open, trusting, and surrendered? Real-life examples echo this revelation. Bruce Lee, though known as a martial artist, was also a deep philosopher. He once said, "It is not a daily increase, but a daily decrease. Hack away at the inessentials." Are you now being called to release the layers you once thought you needed to finally access the simplicity of being? This is the paradox of spiritual evolution. In the beginning, complexity feels like depth, but in the end, clarity feels like truth. You begin to seek God not in 100 directions, but in silence, stillness, and surrendered presence. You begin to understand that peace doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from trusting the one who knows all. You stop idolizing information. You stop chasing signs. You stop looking for God in every corner because you now know He has been within you all along. This is the wisdom of your final cycle. It doesn't impress. It doesn't boast. It simply is. And in that stillness, you find what you've been searching for from the very beginning. A direct, unshakable connection with the divine. Suddenly, without warning, you feel an undeniable pull, a yearning to simplify everything around you. It's not just a preference anymore. It feels spiritual. The noise, the clutter, the excess, it all begins to weigh heavy on your soul. You start desiring less, not out of apathy, but because your spirit is craving clarity. You find yourself quietly decluttering your environment, stepping away from overcommitments, and gently distancing from relationships that feel scattered or surface level. Even your spiritual life begins to change. The books, the teachings, the endless streams of information that once fascinated and inspired you now feel like too much. Instead of learning more, you begin craving stillness. Instead of seeking answers, you begin surrendering to presence. You may pause and ask yourself, why am I withdrawing from so much? Have I lost motivation? Have I become lazy or spiritually numb? But the truth is far more powerful than that. You're not disconnecting, you're integrating. This shift is not regression, it is evolution. You are no longer chasing the light outside of you because you are starting to embody the light within you. As Jesus said in Luke 17:21, "The kingdom of God is within you." Could it be that your soul is finally realizing that what you once sought in the world has already been planted inside your spirit? In this sacred season, you become more sensitive to noise, both literal and energetic. You crave quiet, not because you're antisocial, but because your inner world is growing louder. You want fewer words and more meaning, less debate, more discernment. You long for spiritual practices that are less about performance and more about presence. You no longer need long, elaborate prayers to prove your devotion. Sometimes a single whisper of, "Here I am, Lord," carries more power than 1,000 eloquent words. Do you feel that too? That shift from explaining your faith to simply living it? King Solomon, considered one of the wisest men to walk the earth, wrote in Ecclesiastes 1:18, "For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." There comes a time in your spiritual journey when acquiring more knowledge no longer satisfies you. Instead, you begin to hunger for embodiment, for wisdom lived, not just studied. Could this be the season where God is shifting you from learning to becoming? We often see this same transformation in the lives of great leaders. Take Malala Yousafzai, for example. After surviving a brutal attack, her response was not to speak louder, but to speak clearer. Her mission became simpler: to advocate for education and human dignity. She once said, "With guns you can kill terrorists, with education you can kill terrorism." Her clarity didn't come from consuming more, but from cutting through the noise and standing in truth. What distractions might God be asking you to release so your mission can become that clear? What once felt like disinterest or spiritual fatigue is now revealed as sacred integration. You are shifting from seeking to being, from trying to understand everything to simply trusting what God is doing in you. You are learning to live by faith, not by explanation. And this is a deeper kind of knowing, one that requires fewer words, more awareness, less proving, more presence. As Psalm 46:10 reminds us, "Be still and know that I am God." That's not just a gentle reminder, it's a divine instruction for this phase of your journey. You are being called to stillness, not to stop moving, but to move from a place of peace rather than striving. And in this stillness, you will discover the fullness of who you were always meant to be. Something profound has changed within you. Your spirit now leans toward quality rather than quantity, not just in material things, but in your thoughts, your time, your energy, and your connections. Where you once gathered ideas like treasures, trying to absorb more, understand more, do more, you now find yourself quietly pulling back. You realize that wisdom isn't found in collecting more knowledge, but in embodying what you already know. Mastery for you is no longer about reaching a high intellectual peak. It's about whether your smallest actions reflect your deepest truths. Are your choices rooted in alignment or in obligation? Do your habits reflect your values or your fears? You begin decluttering your physical space, not just to clean, but to create clarity. You say no without guilt. You free yourself from commitments that no longer align with your spirit. What used to feel like sacrifice now feels like liberation. These aren't just lifestyle changes. They are sacred, energetic decisions. Each no becomes a yes to your purpose. Each item you release, each routine you simplify, becomes a symbol of the deeper alignment unfolding within. Have you noticed how peace begins to rise as the unnecessary falls away? This is a clear mark that you are entering your final spiritual cycle, a time when your soul becomes extremely selective about what it allows in. Why? Because frequency matters now more than ever. In Proverbs 4:23, we are warned, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. This means protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's spiritual warfare. Simplicity is not laziness. It's your divine strategy for preserving the high frequency your calling demands. Jesus himself lived with intention and simplicity. He didn't chase crowds, he walked with purpose. He often retreated into solitude to pray, recenter, and recalibrate. Luke 5:16 tells us, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." He understood what many chosen ones forget. Power flows from alignment, not busyness. What if your increasing desire to do less is actually God's invitation for you to go deeper? This pattern is echoed in the lives of many purpose-driven individuals. Marie Kondo, known for her worldwide impact on decluttering, built her message around one profound idea: keep only what sparks joy. But joy for you as God's chosen goes even deeper than preference. It becomes spiritual resonance. Can you feel when something no longer resonates? Can you tell when a space, a relationship, or even a thought begins lowering your vibration? Now, your routines become rituals. Your spaces become sanctuaries. Your days are shaped not by how much you can accomplish, but by how much presence you can bring into everything you do. Even the way you breathe feels more intentional. Simplicity has become your shield, your strategy, your song. You're no longer here to impress, you're here to align. No longer here to chase validation, you're here to steward what's sacred. And in this final cycle, less truly becomes more. What stays in your life now stays because it is vibrating at the same frequency of your destiny. You don't need to force things to fall away. They simply cannot remain. Like oil separating from water, the things that are not meant for you gently dissolve. What remains is meaning, alignment, and purpose. And the more you honor this, the more room you make for divine expansion. So let me ask you, what in your life right now feels heavy, cluttered, or misaligned? What have you been holding on to out of habit that your soul is quietly asking you to release? This isn't just about tidying your life. It's about tuning your life to heaven's frequency, because in the final cycle, only truth can remain. At the beginning of your spiritual journey, the focus was naturally inward, and rightfully so. You needed to heal. You needed to understand the roots of your pain, the shape of your identity, and the reasons behind your emotional patterns. This stage was sacred. You learned to sit with yourself, to nurture the broken places, to forgive what hurt you, and to reclaim what was lost. You asked the right questions. Who am I? What am I here to learn? How can I become whole? And through that personal work, your life began to transform. You may have experienced greater peace, clarity, emotional intelligence, and confidence. But all of this was preparation. That phase was never the destination, it was the foundation. As you enter your final spiritual cycle, something subtle but undeniable begins to shift. You begin to feel that your growth is no longer just for you. The healing you've walked through, the wisdom you've gained, the inner strength you've developed, it starts to pulse with a new purpose. You realize you weren't just healing for personal freedom. You were being prepared to carry light into dark places for the sake of others. Your spiritual path begins expanding into the collective. You find yourself deeply affected by world events, societal injustices, the rise and fall of communities, and even the unspoken emotional climate of those around you. Do you ever feel sadness without knowing why? Joy that isn't yours. It could be your spirit tuning into a higher spiritual field, the realm where chosen ones operate not just as individuals, but as vessels for transformation. This isn't imagination, it's intercession. In Ezekiel 22:30, God says, "I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land." That someone could be you. You begin to realize you are being called to stand in the gap, to sense what others cannot, to carry burdens they don't yet understand, to pray on behalf of souls you've never met. Why? Because you've been spiritually trained for it. Because your life, your journey, your breaking and your healing were all orchestrated to prepare you for this level of responsibility. A clear example of this shift can be found in the life of Martin Luther King Jr. He began his journey as a pastor focused on theology and truth. But the more he grew spiritually, the more he could feel the weight of injustice, not just in his church, but in his nation. His personal convictions became a public mission. He once said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" That question begins to echo in the hearts of all chosen ones who step into their final cycle. This new stage isn't about preaching to the world, it's about serving it energetically, spiritually, prophetically. You may find yourself waking up with a burden to pray for regions you've never visited, interceding for people you'll never meet, or being moved to speak truth into places where it may not be welcomed. Why? Because the frequency you now carry is no longer personal. It's prophetic. You are starting to vibrate at a level that affects atmospheres. Romans 8:19 says, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed." Could it be that creation itself is waiting for you to fully step into your role? Could the earth be groaning for the chosen ones to awaken, not just for personal elevation, but for global restoration? The journey inward was necessary, but now your energy is expanding outward. You begin recognizing that you are part of something far greater than yourself, a divine movement that transcends borders, names, and faces. This is no longer just about becoming your best self. It's about becoming the vessel through which God releases His healing, His wisdom, and His justice into the world. So, what is the world waiting for you to release? What have you been given that the collective needs? You were not chosen just to survive. You were chosen to serve, to shift, and to set the captives free. You've likely begun to notice that global events now touch you more profoundly than ever before. But it's not rooted in fear or anxiety. It's something deeper, spiritual, even sacred. You're not simply reacting to what's happening in the world, you're perceiving it. You feel the emotional climate behind the headlines, the spiritual tension beneath political shifts, and the energetic weight of global crises. Why? Because your soul now understands that your energy is part of a much larger field. You're no longer just an individual on a path. You are a contributor to the vibrational frequency of humanity itself. This realization brings a sense of both empowerment and holy responsibility. You begin to see that your personal healing isn't just for your peace of mind. It's a divine ripple that impacts your home, your community, and beyond. Every act of forgiveness you embody, every word you speak with love, every boundary you hold in truth, it all echoes outward. You are now aware that your very presence can shift an atmosphere. Have you ever entered a room and felt tension dissolve just by staying grounded in your spirit? That's not coincidence. That's divine resonance. Your intuition begins to sharpen in ways you can't fully explain. You might feel the spiritual tremors of a societal shift before it appears on the news. You may sense environmental unrest or become aware of collective emotional waves that pass through the world like invisible tides. These insights don't come from logic, they come from alignment. In Amos 3:7, Scripture reveals, "Surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing His plan to His servants, the prophets." Could it be that you are among those servants, those chosen ones who are receiving advanced revelations not through study, but through spiritual connection? Even your dreams might shift. You may wake up with a burden for a region you've never visited. You may feel prompted to pray for a situation you haven't seen, only to later realize it was unfolding in real time. These aren't coincidences. This is what it means to live as a spiritual antenna for God's kingdom on earth. Have you started to wonder why your sensitivity to the world is increasing just as your connection to distractions is decreasing? This kind of calling is not without weight. It can be overwhelming to feel so much, to know without knowing how you know. But remember, even Jesus wept over Jerusalem, not because He was weak, but because He was deeply connected to the destiny and pain of the people. As one of God's chosen, you carry that same burden, not as a curse, but as a calling. Galatians 6:2 reminds us, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Real-life spiritual leaders have experienced this same dynamic. Take Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. again. Not only was he moved by the injustice he witnessed, but he often spoke of sensing the fierce urgency of now. He was spiritually attuned to what was coming before it came. His intuition wasn't random, it was prophetic, and it fueled a movement that changed the course of history. Could your sharpened spiritual perception be the beginning of a mission that stretches far beyond what you currently see? Now, more than ever, your life becomes a prayer in motion. Your choices, your healing, your stillness, and even your presence, these are the tools God uses to stabilize a shaking world. When others panic, you're called to anchor. When others spread fear, you are called to speak light. When the world shouts, you are called to listen deeply for heaven's whisper. This is the reality of your final spiritual cycle. You no longer separate your inner world from the outer world. You are a bridge between the divine and the human, between heaven's will and earth's need. And every step you take in alignment sends a signal into the spiritual field. Light is here, truth is here, love is still moving. There comes a point in your journey where your spiritual focus shifts yet again, from individual healing to collective impact. You no longer feel content only supporting personal transformation. Now, your heart stirs for something greater. You feel called to uplift communities, systems, and causes that reflect divine truth, justice, and restoration. Whether it's through advocacy, mentorship, leadership, or simply holding space, you sense that your gifts were never meant to stay private. They were meant to become public offerings of light. You may find yourself drawn to movements that align with God's heart, even if you're not on the front lines. You may support behind the scenes, interceding, guiding, or stabilizing the spiritual atmosphere in places where truth is just beginning to rise. And yet, you also carry a wisdom that you didn't have in earlier stages. You no longer feel the pressure to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You understand your divine boundaries. You don't burn yourself out trying to fix everything. Instead, you honor your unique role within a much larger tapestry. You no longer confuse urgency with calling. You recognize that while the world may be crying out for healing, God hasn't asked you to do everything, only to do your part in excellence and obedience. Have you ever felt a nudge to act, but also a peace that reminds you you're not alone in this? This is what it means to move from striving to alignment, from control to surrender, from ego-driven saving to spirit-led serving. Jesus modeled this perfectly. He healed individuals, but his mission was always bigger than any one person. He chose disciples, not because he needed help, but because he was building a kingdom, brick by brick, soul by soul. In John 17:18, Jesus prayed to the Father, "As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world." He didn't send them out alone. He sent them as parts of a divine collective, working together for a higher purpose. Could it be that you're stepping into the same kind of divine collaboration? This shift from personal identity to collective service isn't a loss, it's an expansion. You're not disappearing into the crowd. You are becoming part of a spiritual constellation where each star has its unique shine, but together they light up the heavens. You're still you, but now you're a bridge, a stabilizer, a frequency carrier. Your calm presence helps others feel grounded. Your words plant seeds of truth in places still battling confusion. Your walk becomes a mirror for those just beginning their path. This transformation can be seen in real-world changemakers too. Consider Malala Yousafzai. As a young girl, her activism began with personal survival and education. But as her platform grew, so did her understanding of purpose. She didn't try to fix everything. Instead, she focused on her unique voice and became a bridge between cultures, generations, and belief systems. She once said, "When the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful." And in your case, that voice is infused with divine energy. You're no longer driven by a need to be the hero. You're motivated by alignment with God's will. You've matured enough to recognize that being chosen doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing what is yours with unwavering faith. As Romans 12:4-5 reminds us, "For just as each of us has one body with many members, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others." You now see yourself as a part of this sacred body, no longer isolated, but interwoven with purpose. So, chosen one, what role has God uniquely designed for you? Where does your energy feel most alive, most effective, most at peace? This final cycle isn't about carrying everything. It's about flowing within your assignment, knowing that when each chosen one rises in their place, The kingdom of God advances as one. As we come to the end of this message, I want you to take a moment and reflect on what we've just discussed. If the signs shared in this video resonated with you, not merely as interesting concepts, but as profound truths you've been feeling deep inside, know this: you are not imagining things. You're not simply evolving, you are completing an ancient and sacred journey that spans across lifetimes. You have reached the final stages of a cycle that has shaped your soul's purpose from the very beginning. This is the closing of a chapter, the final alignment of the soul that was always meant to happen. In this moment, you are completing soul contracts that you may have forgotten about. You are closing karmic loops that have followed you through time and space. You are returning to a state of being that existed long before the world ever taught you to forget your true essence. That's why the shifts you're experiencing feel so intense. The world around you no longer feels as it once did, and old ways of thinking, living, and relating are no longer in harmony with your soul's growth. The relationships that once felt comfortable may now feel draining or misaligned, and patterns that once seemed to define you are rapidly dissolving. This is not because you are changing too quickly, but because you finally reached the place where change is no longer a struggle. It's where your growth is being integrated into every aspect of your being. The discomfort you may be feeling is simply the process of your higher self merging with your earthly existence, reminding you that you're not only here to live, but to serve and to evolve beyond the limitations of the past. This process is sacred, and it's part of the divine design for your life. You are not alone in this process. In fact, many souls are walking this same path right now, reaching the end of their final spiritual cycle. But this is not an escape from life. It is a stepping into a deeper level of purpose. You are being called to serve others in ways that are far greater than you may have imagined. You are preparing to guide others, not by forcing them to follow you, but by holding space for them to walk their own path, just as you have walked yours. You are stepping into a role of wisdom, presence, and love, where you will help others navigate their own journeys, all without attachment, all without rushing the process. You are learning to serve without rescuing, to offer guidance without controlling. The path ahead may seem uncertain at times, but I want you to remember, this is not the end of your journey, it's the beginning of something new. You are evolving into a version of yourself that can embody the highest expression of divine love, compassion, and purpose. The world needs the energy you carry, and you have been chosen to bring that energy forward. This is a time of expansion, not contraction, a time for you to embrace the fullness of your soul's mission. If this message spoke to something real inside you, something you have known deep down but have only now begun to understand, I invite you to continue walking this journey with us. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this message with others who might need to hear it, for you never know whose life you could touch by spreading these words of encouragement. If you feel moved to do so, please consider supporting this work by donating through Super Thanks. Your contribution helps us continue to share these messages of truth and light with the world. Whether you choose to donate or not, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your presence and support. Your energy and your commitment to your own spiritual journey are a blessing to us all. As we walk this path together, may you continue to be guided, protected, and empowered. May God's abundant blessings flow into your life as you move forward, not only for your own growth, but for the collective good. Remember, your journey is just beginning, and we are here to walk alongside you every step of the way.